Welcome to what may be the spiciest episode we've had here on the RXP Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about AI. And no, I'm not talking about the lovable primate in Super Monkey Ball, but artificial intelligence.
It's a deep cut.
And more specifically, the generative AI. But before we get there, joining me, Alex, your host, to discuss this very, I would say, contentious, maybe volatile, just it's a very sensitive area right now, especially at this point in human existence, I guess, not to be overly dramatic. But to talk about this with me are my co-hosts, Matt.
Was this script generated by AI?
Oh, damn.
I don't know if that's supposed to be a compliment or a dig, but I'm not going to answer that question.
One time, what was it? Was it, I forget if it was a Jamer Pod segment, and didn't you generate something? I don't know. No?
Alex is shaking his head.
Maybe yeah, I guess not.
All right, moving
Tiffany?
on.
Hey, everybody. Happy to be back.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
And that fourth voice you hear is Yasser.
Hello, my friends. It is wonderful to be back.
And back we are, and obviously it's been a little bit upload-wise, recording-wise for us here. And to celebrate that, to kind of bring it back together, obviously we've had our typical yearly episode releases come out. Obviously our goals, our Fantasy Critic episode, and we wanted to, bring back the topics. It's been a while, right? Because obviously we end every year with our usual run, and we begin every year with our usual installments. And so with this, we're going to be talking about generative AI. And just to give a little brief explanation, for you listeners that maybe aren't in tune with the advancement of artificial intelligence, or specifically generative artificial intelligence. Very simply, it's basically a fancy algorithm, a set of rules that is trained on data and essentially mimics, the human kind of brain in a way, because right, the technical term is these generative AI models are forms of neural networks. So obviously, as you might be aware, in your brain you have a bunch of neurons. Those neurons are connected to each other, right, to form thoughts, to connect memories. And essentially a generative AI model is just that, but in a computer. Some examples that you might have heard of that are generative AI models: ChatGPT, DALL-E, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. These are, a range of things, right? And obviously at this point in our lives, AI has kind of evolved into, I guess, specialties. So stuff like DALL-E, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, those are image generating AI models. And something like ChatGPT, right, is more kind of synthesis, more knowledge-based, right, where you're taking kind of this raw data and formulating outcomes based on the data it's trained on. And so with that as a briefer, right, so essentially think of this as a digital human. That's kind of the very basic understanding. In 2025, we're here, right? AI is present. It's been around for at least, a decade or so, very much in its infancy stages a decade ago, but now, out in the public sphere. And it's starting to creep into the entertainment that we enjoy in our free time, that we always talk about here on the podcast. And so with this episode, I kind of want to go into it with my co-host here of how have we felt the effects of AI, if we have encountered it, if we have noticed it in the things we're consuming, in the entertainment medium. And specifically, I want to direct this first question to Matt. Matt, our resident film connoisseur here. We're coming right off of the Oscars.
Ooh, yeah.
And I know, and maybe it was contentious, maybe not, but a couple of the Oscar films nominated this year for various awards were confirmed to have AI used in the making of these films. And so I don't want to make it specifically, calling out the films and being like, well, should that disqualify them from awards or not? At least not at this point of the conversation. But Matt, are you aware that some of these films had AI? Was it something, that ever came up to you? Or is this, me breaking the news to you in a bad way of saying, hey, some of your favorite films might have just been, supported by this tool?
Wouldn't that have been awful if this was the way that I found out about it? It's like, what? Yeah, so I only know of one specific one because it was kind of like tightly contested as a kind of award. Like people didn't know who was going to win Best Actor leading into the Oscars. Adrian Brody, I don't know if that's part of the example that you're thinking about.
It is, yeah, The Brutalist.
So he was like steamrolling for Best Actor all year. And then kind of some of these things came out. The director talked about, yes, we used some AI, specifically with part of the film being in Hungarian, kind of to smooth out the edges of his lines that he did give in Hungarian. And people were basically debating on, hey, does this disqualify him from doing Best Actor if, what we get on the screen doesn't necessarily match what's happening in real life? And he ended up winning still. And I think it was like Timothée Chalamet was like a little bit closer to winning his first Oscar because of this kind of AI snafu. But it's really interesting. And like, we don't have to get into it right now. We can maybe talk about it later. But yeah, like this is maybe the first year where I've heard about it in the Oscar race of like kind of moral gray areas of how do we use this as a tool? And when is it more than a tool? Like, is this taking away jobs? Like, what is happening with this? So yeah, definitely seeing it seep into it for sure.
Tiffany or Yasser, not necessarily just the
Listen.
movies, but how have you come across AI?
So this is like a very, this topic is very close to home for me. Like I've followed this very closely. This is a topic that I'm really excited about. I could honestly have a conversation about this for like 10 hours. I'd probably not be done. But I will do my best to not like rant and make this a longer pod than it needs to be. But I
10
am
hours. 10 hours.
but I will say
That's a YouTube
a
limit.
couple things. One, thank you for hosting because I didn't want to have to put through the trouble of hosting, and you just so kindly suggested to do so. So thank you, Alex. And number two, I'm gonna try to make the opinion on this pod that there's no bad use case for AI as we know it right now and as we've heard about it in like the media and the news. And I actually think it's all a positive thing. And so slight spoilers, but as we kind of go through this, I'm going to try to explain why I think that.
Tiffany?
I have a very glaring example of AI use being absolutely horrible.
Okay.
But I guess I'm not going to go with that yet. But for me, I think the most that I've seen it use, at least in media setting, was with the Marvel show Secret Invasion, where the opening credits had AI art. And I'm not going to lie, it looked weird. And then to find out that it was AI art, I was like, ew, like that's like, it couldn't be better. I don't know. I guess it was just too abstract. I just wasn't into it. It was too abstract. I get really unsettled when I see AI art in work PowerPoints when they use like AI art in slide decks, and I see like,
Oh wow,
the people have 7 fingers and like an arm coming out of a place that's not physically possible. That piece is quite unsettling. And I also don't really care for AI art on book covers. I can't really name any, but I know that some books have utilized AI art for whatever reason or another. I'm not the biggest fan of that. But one area that I see an interesting use of, and this is where it does get totally gray, is that on Bookstagram or Book Talk, when people use Midjourney or other AI art platforms to basically create almost movie trailers of a book that doesn't have a movie.
That's
That
interesting.
is very cool. And in the beginning, I was very fooled. There were a few moments where I was fooled about it being AI art or not. You know what I mean? Like, to me, I was like, did they just like really touch up? Did they get someone to cosplay as a character and really touch them up? That's honestly what I thought in the beginning. But later I came to realize that the artist on the account straight up said, like, I use Midjourney, like, for my art here. So, like, at least they're being forthcoming with that. But I'm not going to lie, it's helped me picture some of these books in the sense of like, oh man, that would be so cool if this got made into like an HBO show.
Sure.
And seeing this like 1 minute art rendition with AI art look so good. And so that has been kind of inspiring. And I'm like, oh man, I wish I could see this come to real life. And then this is where I get a little bit weird. Like, if they're making money off their content, I feel kind of gross about it. But if it's really just for the purposes of creation and just like look at what could be possible if people, put their money behind funding a real creation of it, or like, if they do real, quote unquote, real art on the side that's completely their own, that would be, I would support that. They're just trying to get their names out there or whatever, so they're doing AI art, but like they really have regular art. I don't know, stuff like that. That's where I fall. I think there can be good uses out of it. It just feels kind of weird how it came about in general, like AI being fed things that, I don't know. I don't want to go down that path right now.
So honestly, you make a lot of good points. I think you've kind of already outlined a lot of the contentious parts about artificial intelligence. And that's why I totally agree with Alex when he kind of primed this episode that this is going to be a spicy episode. Because a lot of people do feel very oddly about AI. They don't know how to feel, more or less. And I think you kind of echo that. And really, the idea of what you were saying for like some of those negative aspects, I would argue are more poor implementation of AI, and not necessarily that AI is a bad tool in general, just they used it incorrectly. But honestly, like, it's kind of funny when we think about it. I'm going to try not to rant here, but AI and artificial intelligence, like you say, it's in its infancy, but like I would say it's closer to like a zygote at this point. Like, we're not even scratching the surface at this point of what AI is. All the examples that we talked about today are literally just the definition of machine learning, which is basically you give a system a lot of data endpoints, whether it's images, whether it's code, whether it's games, whether it's movies, book content, and then it spits out based on what other people have developed and other trailers have shown, it's variation of what you're asking for. And basically without that data, it does nothing. It's useless. And so you have to have the data in order to have AI do things appropriately. But then you do see those like weird things like, oh, why does this have 6 fingers? Why is his arm coming out that way? It doesn't look natural. Because over time, these kind of machine learning algorithms get better and better as they try to do more and more with it. But we're so early on that we see these like inaccuracies and malformations that we wouldn't expect to see in the future. But this is just the cost of doing development right now and trying to make money off of AI right now, because everyone thinks of like AI as the new buzzword. I feel like 2025 is, and probably even the last couple of years have been the years of AI where everyone's trying to implement AI one way or another to help them make money or help them like kind of expand their business in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, really it comes down to, and I do want to kind of roll through some examples. So Tiffany, as she mentioned, the Secret Invasion Marvel television show on Disney Plus, very blatant use of it in that intro. You know, I'm on her side. Like, I just think that looked horrendous. I mean, I feel like probably an argument could be made about, you know, the themes of the show and right, the visuals being presented in that intro may be kind of a reflection of that. I didn't watch the show, so I'm not sure. For you, would you say, do you think there's any kind of argument that could have been made to say, oh well, the idea about the whole, the hiding in plain sight, right, the the
scrolls.
transmorphing and stuff, yeah, the scrolls being like embedded into human society like that, is there anything connected to that? And just very briefly, I'm not looking for some in-depth thing, but like, could there be some reasoning tied there?
I mean, yes, you could stretch it where
Sure.
they are not one of us, and so art was made that was not one of us. I don't know.
Right. Just something that there could be something where I'm not trying to discount it completely. I just think from an artistic perspective, it did look just ugly. But art is subjective, right? And obviously, all the media that we consume and enjoy is up to our own taste. So that's just a subjective basis there. But just to go through some other things, right? Because I just want to get some more examples out there. Because obviously, we talked about The Brutalist and Adrian Brody's accent, right, being used in that. And we talked about Secret Invasion. The Complete Unknown. Matt, did you know there was AI used in that?
Tell me about it. What happened?
So the Timothy Chalamet's stunt double, they actually used AI to better match the stunt double's likeness to Chalamet.
Interesting.
So, yeah,
what do
so
you
there's
need
a
a
degree
stunt
of
double
AI
for that
there.
movie? Interesting.
Civil War. Apparently, that was a movie that came out last year. Matt, for these movies, I'm going to go to you because if anyone is aware of it, I would hope you are. Did you hear about Civil War? It came out last year.
No, well, I watched it. What did it?
Oh, you
what
did
they
watch
do?
it.
Yeah.
So this wasn't in the movie, but
Okay.
they made promotional posters. All the promotional posters for the movie were generated with AI.
Interesting. I bet the one that I used on Letterboxd was probably AI because it was super clever, and I was like, "Wow, this is great." I probably got duped. Interesting.
How dare you, Matt?
Another example in movies, Amelia Perez, also nominated at the Oscars this
We don't
past
talk
year.
about that movie.
It's so bad.
Apparently,
They needed more AI.
Oh my gosh.
Apparently, the main actress's voice was tuned with AI to give her a broader vocal range for her singing parts.
I think they did that for what is the guy for Bohemian Rhapsody?
Rami Malek?
Guy. Yes, they kind of like made his voice sound more like Freddie Mercury, like using
As he's
AI
singing
models
Mercury's
like
song,
after the
right?
fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting confused here. When they say they used AI, this is also where I'm like, normally wouldn't a person manipulate things?
Yeah. That's right.
But in
Yeah.
this situation, you're saying that they use an AI program to do the work for them.
So the specifics are very loose, and maybe this is going to come into the later part of the episode. So, searching on the internet, these were just confirmed things in interviews. So the actual degree or the manner in which the AI was implemented, I'm not 100% clear on. It was just that these were confirmed by people that worked on these projects, that there was some form or shape of AI used in these creative processes.
So the one about The Brutalist, because that one has been all over movie news.
Yeah.
Like in the past 2 months. And so we know like a lot of what goes into it. So it was actually brought up by the film editor who's Hungarian himself. And so generally what they would have done is if their Hungarian just wasn't up to snuff, they would dub in other voice actors to do the Hungarian like on actual screen, and they would just take out or kind of mesh their words to make it more suitable. So instead of doing that, they fed it through an AI generation where the actual film editor, who's Hungarian, would speak Hungarian to then kind of just smooth out the edges. So instead of using a different voice actor to do, the Hungarian lines, they basically use the film editor to kind of just use that as a tool to then smooth out, the Hungarian phrases and everything.
And I feel like a lot of the examples that we've seen and talked about already with movies it's really just using this model to help efficiency as far as while they're developing the movie, right? Like they want to quickly do something so that they don't have to really think about it for very long. And with a lot of these types of tools, same as with the invention of the computer, for example, people are going to lose jobs. Like that's just part of innovation and technology, where you have these like very simple things that you would like to have done, and technology is helping bridge the gap to allow you to do it. And so that stump double example where they help introduce the likeness to make it a more exact match, you can do that today with CGI, but now it's in a more automated fashion that kind of simplifies the process. But obviously you still need to have an editor there to make sure that it looks right and tweak it if necessary to make it look better on the screen. So really, a lot of these examples in my mind are just additional tools that we've been using to help us with the production process.
I feel like we're like in a catch-22. I'm interested to hear your all's thoughts about this, because in one aspect, like let's talk about games for a second. Like game developers are getting laid off all the time, right? And like people are like, are they trying to replace this with AI? But part of the reason why, at least in movie production, that they're using AI is to decrease the budget and then decrease the production time so they can get it out, so they can recoup their money, and like studios can stay open. Like
Right.
The Brutalist took a year and a half to get through everything while using AI to kind of pick up the pace with some of these things. And so it's one of those things where, yes, it may decrease jobs, but also if your budget goes up and also your production time increases, you could also find like whole studios closing.
Exactly.
From a movie standpoint.
Exactly.
Like independent filmmaking
Right.
might just go out the window. So it's such a weird thing, because it's
It
like
is.
we're kind of screwed if we do or screwed if we don't. But I don't know where we lie.
Yeah, and I have just one more movie example just to round it out. Alien Romulus, which I know, Matt, you and Yasser enjoyed. Apparently, AI was used in Ian Holmes' face and
Yep.
voice.
Oh yeah.
So that
was so
was
weird.
Another
AI
contentious
generated.
topic.
Oh, was that weird? I didn't see the movie.
Well, he's passed, and so it was
Yes.
kind of like,
Yeah, it was contentious
It
because
was-
like, how do you kind of appropriate someone's likeness after they pass away, right? Like, how do you get the approval for that? Who gets paid for that? It's a lot of things that you have to kind of question and answer, right, Matt?
yeah. It was just like a very like I feel like that's everybody's like worst taste of it.
Yeah.
I heard, because I only watched it in the theater with Yasser. I heard that the release on streaming and like on like video on demand and Blu-ray, whatever, they've kind of retconned a lot
really?
of that Ian Holmes stuff. So I don't know if it looks any better, but I've
Interesting.
heard that something has changed.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I agree with what you were saying, though, Matt. Like, it really is a catch-22, but that's just how I feel like there's an overemphasis on a lot of the discussions around AI about like all the negative aspects that are involved, and not enough discussion about the things that it does truly help with. For example, you talk about the like potential closure of a studio if they don't meet their budget restraints. But how about a studio that's a small indie studio that doesn't have the manpower for all of these advancements that like Paramount and other big studios have, right? Where you can have these indie studios have AI tools that can put their movies on par, at least as far as logistically and technically, with those bigger studios. And it gives them the empowerment to make a movie the way that they're envisioning it, even if they don't have the resources that those bigger studios have. And that's where I come back to when we talk about AI as a tool, is how can you use it in a smart way that still is it's still true to your artistic vision without trying to seem lazy and trying to like skip steps that you should be doing, whether you're making a movie, whether you're making a video game or anything else, if that makes sense.
You know, this conversation is like, it's so interesting. It's really like spinning the gears in my head because I've really not thought much about it. But like,
It's true. Not a lot of people
like
have.
with like Midjourney, like the art that's done for like the book trailers that I'm talking about, the artist does edit the art to make it to not have the uncanny valley, right? Like, because that, I told you that at the beginning, I was thinking that they got like actual people to be the characters, but they made sure that there was no like extra limbs, going about. Like they
Sure.
they proofread and like correct the art that's being spit out. I really don't know how Midjourney works. I don't know what that's about, but they do fine tooth comb it before they like post it. And I'm thinking back about like for me the idea that art on the internet and words on the internet were fed into AI algorithms to learn without compensating people for their work, but at the same time, obviously we had no idea that this could be possible, so there's no way to future proof that.
Yeah.
And also one could argue if you're posting it on the internet, it's for people to see.
It's a public forum at that point, right?
Yeah, so it's just like available, and it's like if I bought Yasser a book and I gave it to you, and then you're like, oh, I'm gonna like tear out the pages and make an origami thing, like I can't be mad
Right.
that you're ruining the book that I just gave you, because literally once I gifted it to you, you can do whatever you want with it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no,
That is my
I
opinion.
totally agree.
So, people, on DeviantArt back in the day, God, the number of like fan art that I've
Another deep cut.
like look
Let's go
like
DeviantArt.
like look up freaking like like Pokemon turned into humans. Like people still do that now. Like this is a Bulbasaur boy, and it's basically a humanoid character that has Bulbasaur's colors and maybe like a backpack that's like his bulb or whatever. People do that all the time. They're posting it there. Look at this. And if you would like to buy print of it, please do. So I don't.
I would be remiss to not bring this up now, and just as a boilerplate, because I know if people listen to this and they got this far, that hopefully they're waiting to hear something like this. I think the training data conversation could be a whole nother conversation
totally.
in and of itself.
That's why I say this could be a 10-hour
and
combo.
I don't, and I don't want to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
down that road, because for me, my blanket statement on that is that I completely disagree with your stance on it, that when you're posting something to the internet, it should just be allowed to be scraped, because there is a degree of saying, well, if I post something and you copy and paste it onto a piece of paper and then you go sell it for $10 at your local market, technically you can do that, but the point of me posting it isn't to enable you to make profit off of stuff that I made. And obviously when we're talking about the data, that's where it's getting a little bit more difficult, because obviously when we're generating these things from terabytes and petabytes of data, that's being scraped from these public areas, it's harder to say that specifically this aspect of what was produced by the model is taken from you. But I feel like that's where the line is so blurred right now, because it's I would say I would agree with you if there was like a database to say, hey, we'll pay you per upload if you want to upload art into this that we can then train our model on, and then anything we make, you have no recourse to sue us or to say we owe you royalties or something, because it's like, oh, you sold us the right to use the data of your creation to then make something. And I think that's fine then, as long as there's like a pathway to fully compensate. But when we go into the internet as an open space, which it is, and it's obviously what enables it to be such a great place, to find a lot of things, to find inspiration in, it's just the money aspect is where everything gets super gray area. And I think it really depends on the person where you lean in saying, is that something you say it can be taken or not? But like I said, that's not for this conversation. I kind of want to keep it on the generate aspect, but I do want to point it out there, say we do acknowledge that is an aspect of generative AI here on the pod. And I don't want the listeners, you listeners, to think, oh, we're just glossing over the fact that this is technically or potentially stolen, quote unquote, via your perspective.
Yeah. Honestly, I think
creations.
that's totally fair. I'm
but
glad that you called it out. All I'll say about this is that all art, in my opinion, is stolen. And I don't like the word stolen, but I'm using it in the same context that you're using it here, because all art is inspired by other art. It's just how it is. When someone sees a Pokemon and they want to make something similar, say Pal World, say anything else, we are inspired by the art that we see. And so we can't say you can't make something similar to my art just because I want to make money off of it. Like, everyone has their own inspirations, and they use that to create their own art. So it's a really tough topic, and I just think you go down a very slippery slope when you say, like, oh, I need to be compensated for my work just because I posted on the internet.
And to go along with that, I mean, that's, Matt was talking about games, right? Obviously smaller studios, indie studios. So I do want to talk about some examples of games with AI generated content in it. First and foremost, pretty big, Call of Duty. Yeah. So the last few Call of Duties have been confirmed, and this is due to the fact that Steam now requires you to disclose whether or not there is AI generated content in your game when you publish to Steam. But the most recent Call of Duties, Black Ops 6, Modern Warfare 3, Warzone, have had or admitted to having some form of AI generated content in it. It is not exactly clear what that content is, but they have at least admitted to there being something AI generated assets in the game.
So would that like, because I know Call of Duty was called out for like some of its promotional material for like zombies or something having AI art in it.
Well,
is that like having to report it to Steam? Is that for the creation of the game or for marketing materials?
That's a good question. I did not look that deeply into that aspect.
Okay.
So
I think it covers all of it.
I cannot answer that here.
In game, you have those promotional images, right?
Oh.
And so it still would count, I think, under Steam's policy. But that's the thing. Like, a lot of the artwork that people have hypothesized were AI generated are just hypotheses. Like, they don't actually have proof that these specific images were AI generated. They just see some things that they think look like AI generation malformations. They're like, oh, okay, that must be AI. We hate this. And so
because the same thing happened to the Fantastic Four movie.
Oh, wait, what happened with that movie?
The like Fantastic Four posters, they were like, oh, this is AI generation because there's not that many fingers or not enough fingers on one of the kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, no, an artist did that. So maybe AI is better than we're giving it credit for.
I mean, honestly, it clearly has its limitations, right? Like, there are things that it consistently gets wrong, but like you said, like, it's hard to really determine just based off things like that, because artists can make mistakes too. And look, in a lot of these situations, like Tiffany had mentioned, editors look at these and they're still missing it. So there is a human element to this as well. But I do think because you see these tags, which I actually am all for Steam's policy for doing this. I really do appreciate the transparency that they're trying to do. But there is just like a buzzword element to this to me, where it's like, oh, as soon as someone sees AI, they're just immediately turned off to a game. And that concerns me as well, because I use Steam more than I think anyone else here. And I feel like Steam as a community hops on hate really quickly. As much as they hop on, like, when people love a game, they'll also hop on when there's any hate involved as well. And they will review bomb it to hell just to make sure that they make their point about AI. And that to me is also like the other side of the coin that people don't talk about as much as well.
To go along with some more games with AI examples, Foam Stars, the cult classic here. We all love Foam Stars on this podcast, right, crew?
You played it so much.
Never forget.
The competitive Splatoon, like from Square Enix, there's albums. So obviously there's music in the game. And for the album covers, they had Midjourney generate those art images, and they just used it in the game. The finals, the competitive shooter, multiplayer shooter, the announcers are all AI generated. So
Really?
all the voiceover you hear for whenever something's happening in the game, those are AI generated lines. Uh,
And
there's
a
that.
funny thing about that for
And
me
I think
was I actually really
Oh, go ahead.
liked the announcers in the finals. I'm not sure how much you guys have liked or have played it, but I like that aspect of it because it reminded me of you'll know this piece, Matt, but it reminded me of the Halo announcers where like they announce like the double
Oh,
kills,
yeah.
the triple kills. Like it
Killtacular.
it reminded me of that. And so I actually thought it was really well done. I wouldn't have known personally that it was AI generated unless like obviously until it gets reported. But I thought that was a good implementation of AI. I actually really enjoyed that.
And I think the biggest one of them all, about a month ago, Microsoft announced their new generative AI for game ideation called Muse.
Saw that.
And I think this ties more into what we were talking about before of saying, right? Obviously, I think in this aspect that they're saying this is meant to help brainstorm ideas, right? So it's using this AI to say, well, we're not necessarily going to make a game completely out of AI, right? I don't think that's, at least right now, that's not Microsoft's marketing with this Muse generative AI. But I think the idea of using it to generate kind of images or scenarios or maybe mechanics even, right? That using that to help inspire game developers to make actual games. I think there is something here that is interesting, right? To say, use it as an inspiration, right? And I think for me, kind of my baseline with how generative AI is across the board is I think I'm very okay with it as long as Yasser pointed out too, it's used to inspire. I'm still more of the fan of, right, like I want to play the games or I want to watch things that are made by humans. But if they were helped inspired using AI or things were done with the help of, AI directing you to say, oh, maybe this is something you could do, I think there is room for that. And it is interesting that obviously Microsoft being big in the tech space, right, creating this, right, and being kind of the first big publisher to kind of be out there, right? Obviously, Activision and Call of Duty has done it, but now that Microsoft owns Activision, you could also just say that that's one big parent bubble there. But definitely, we're at that point where AI, right? We're already here. Whether or not you like it, it's in the things you consume. Probably, I feel like it's touched all of our lives in some way, right? All of us have watched something or played something that has used it already. So it's not like something you can just say, I'm going to avoid everything because you've probably already encountered it. But, right, we talked a lot about this. We talked about a lot of the things that have already used it. And I want to just kind of have this as a segue to the back half of this episode to just talk about, where do we see AI kind of playing in our lives, at least in entertainment media, kind of moving forward. And I feel like part of that, right, as I mentioned with the Muse AI, is this idea of saying, is it meant to help you create new things? But then also, how are we supposed to handle this, right? Because, there's going to be the camps of people, as Matt, or as I also mentioned, excuse me, of saying they're going to brigade against this, that are staunchly anti-AI. And so there's going to be some negative outcomes of review bombing or just kind of posting negative opinions that could drown out an otherwise great game, right? That just because it happened to use AI for some aspect of it, that might not deservedly get all the hate that's being piled on it. And I feel like I want to start this off because I feel like for me, the easiest way, and I don't want to make it so general, but just to be a broad kind of baseline, is that as long as it's disclosed, stuff like as Steam's policy is, and maybe even for movies and shows, right? As long as it's like told to me up front, and maybe even better if you could told me exactly what you used it for. I think that's kind of the baseline moving forward. Like I want to know, what does this include AI generated content? And if you can, what aspect was specifically AI generated? I think as long as that bar is met, I'm kind of fine moving forward because, right, at least that pushes onto you as the consumer of this media, the baseline information to make that informed decision, right? In case you are someone that isn't, at all enthused about AI and the stuff you watch or play, if that's been disclosed to you, you can make those choices yourself versus saying, well, we're just going to hide it and we're going to maybe vaguely say we use it, but we're not going to exactly tell you. I feel like it could lead down to some very dark paths if we're not at least more upfront with it. And that's kind of where my stance is at this point.
Not all of us.
Any thoughts?
Not all of us.
Well,
at
honestly,
once.
I wanted to shut up so you guys could talk more. So I'll let you guys go first.
Do you need me to vamp?
Unless you guys want me to go
vamping.
first, I can obviously go.
I was thinking Tiffany was taking the helm.
Well, I think my biggest hang up is the training data. Like that's where my biggest opinion is. It's weird to me, like one of the things that I don't like with AI is when someone literally says write in AI, like uses AI, ChatGPT, whatever, to craft a book, and then they post it on Amazon to sell, and they take a famous author's name and change one letter of that author's name and tries to come off as that author or straight up using that author's name.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm extremely against that because they're just scamming people. That's pure scamming. Another thing that I mentioned previously about what I don't like about AI at all is the fact that people can generate AI videos or pictures of people doing things that they never did. You know, like
deep fakes.
Yes. This is where I'm like, you're right. It is a tool that can be used for good or bad. There's so many tools in the world that can be used for good or bad. Literally, that's the state of humanity, and that's how humans roll. But those two things just make me so uncomfortable with AI that, I mean, I don't know why. Well, okay, let me kind of take that back. Those two things make me uncomfortable, right? But also, with AI, how it stands now, to be used in media in any way right now, it just seems like a lot of work. I'm like, really? Is it that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're generating a poster with an AI image of people or your characters, I feel like you have to go in and make sure that your person doesn't have 6 fingers or whatever.
Yeah. So let me try to reply to a couple of those. So I do agree with you. I think data collection and how it interprets that data is like a whole nother convo as well. But you're right. The good news is all those things that you mentioned are illegal as far as like plagiarizing or using someone's likeness and then making money off of it. This is all already illegal, and you can already do all those things without AI. And so you're right. We need to really lock in as far as making not only making laws for them, but also enforcing them to make sure that we don't see these in the future, whether in the US or abroad. But the good news is that is going to be like, that's a primary focus and will be a point of emphasis as AI gets used more and more. But then to your second point, you're right. Like AI or like machine learning right now, it's not even that good. Like we've seen the instances of it where it doesn't look very good, and you question like, why are we using it? And the answer is because this is just the future of how we're going to make things in like 5 to 10 years from now or beyond, where it's going to be tough, to Alex's point, where you may want to have that disclosure, but the real question is going to be which parts of media aren't using AI tools, not which ones are, because the vast majority are going to start using them. And so do you really need a disclosure for like 98% of the media that we see in 20 years from now that it's using AI? Probably not, right? If that's the case.
I still think you do, because it helps delineate the pre-AI era, right? I think that's the biggest thing, is obviously everything that was out before AI was developed as a tool. Right, those are going to be labeled as non-AI. So I think it's just easy to say this was AI generated or has some AI generated aspect, and obviously these weren't AI generated, because there's going to be things, right? Those are immutable things of speeches, images, photography, right? Like stuff like that specifically wasn't. And so that's where I'm like, I think it is something that should be carried into the infinite future. unless we hit some sort of cataclysm where all the previous knowledge is lost, and right then who cares at that point. But as long as we're kind of having this continuous history, I think that's kind of where I'm like, I just want that labeling, like if we're, it's kind of like Prop 65 in California, right? Obviously it's something that they passed in that state just to say, hey, to most people, it doesn't matter, but they passed this, state law basically saying if there are things in this product that are known to cause cancer or have some link to causing cancer, we're going to put this label on it. And I think it's as simple as that, just as a notice.
But see, that Prop 65 is exactly my point. That's a great example of why, like, you could have good intentions for something as far as like making it transparent, but then when you see it in practice, everything has that label. And it's like, well, what the heck? I just buy anything and it says that it could cause cancer. And so then you're kind of losing the importance of the label and the disclosure. Where it's like...
yes and no, because I think it's still spreading awareness.
We can agree to disagree on that, right? But I think that's my view of it is all.
Yeah.
But to me, again, it just comes down to like, it's a tool. And we don't say, oh, this was made by Photoshop every time an image is made by Photoshop. We don't say this movie was made by DaVinci program because it was made by DaVinci. Like, we don't see those. And to me, it translates to just another tool.
Well, they credit
they credit at the end, and credits for sure.
Right.
That I could see. But to say like
no, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Like, that's basically the same thing. Like, I just want some sort of notice to be like, it is attributed.
That I can agree
like
with.
that.
For sure,
I just want that.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Yeah,
totally. But to have that transparency ahead of time, I think is going to be kind of tough because we're going to just see more and more of it. But I think right now that makes sense because right now we're still, like I said, like we've all said, it's in its infancy. And so having that transparency, I think, makes a lot of sense for sure. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, like I'm trying not to be like super doom and gloom by it. Like, I think art transcends when, like, in these situations, like CGI used to be the big hotness.
Yeah.
And like looking back at old films that use CGI, like have you guys gone back and watched the first X-Men?
No.
And like watch that Toad versus Storm fight.
It's been a while.
It does not look the same as it did when I was a kid. But
he's like, it looks even better.
It looks even better. But like CGI is now everywhere, right? And people invest so much money in CGI, and CGI has gotten so much better. But you know what? Sometimes CGI can feel so lifeless. Like, I watched Venom: The Last Dance last night.
Oh my god!
Awful. Like, it was an awful movie.
Yeah.
And
but
you know
that's
what?
the
Some
movie.
of that CGI.
Yeah.
Some of that CGI is amazing. He's literally like transforming a horse into a Venom horse, and it looks like real life. But that movie is a shell of a movie. It's awful. It's so bad. And so like now when we see stop animation is now becoming much more prevalent. Like out of the 5 short animated films nominated at the Oscars, 3 of them were stop animation. And that's an old style of animation. Practical effects are so much, I feel like people feel so much better about a film when they see more of practical effects. And that used to be kind of like the old guard. And I feel like AI, if people use AI to smooth out edges, to do, to find ways to cut back cost and cut production time, I'm okay with it because I feel like the true art is going to make its way to the top. The biggest example recently is the Severance theme, season 1 and season 2. If you're watching the title sequence and seeing this art, this is like, honestly, I had to Google it to see like, is this AI? And it's this person, his Instagram is extra weg, like extra and then WEG.
Okay.
He has some
Shout
trippy
out.
stuff. He's like I think he's like a German or something, and he makes all this art.
He's a German.
And a German, yeah.
Guten Tag, German listeners.
He makes this art that is just fantastical and trippy and amazing, and it matches Severance to a T. And it's like that's going to transcend all of this like controversy because people Like the true artists are going to rise to the top, I feel. And like, yes, there's going to be a ton of shovelware. And like, honestly, my biggest gripe right now with AI is that every time I go into the PlayStation store or any other digital storefront, there is just AI generated shovelware everywhere. 99 cents to get a platinum in 10 minutes or less. Like, you know, like Big Booty Simulator 2025. Like, come on in.
Hey,
like,
take that back.
I'm waiting for
ridiculous.
2026.
That was made by humans, and I love that game.
It is just ridiculous. And it's the same thing that, you know, Tiffany's talking about. They are, mouthwashing was like a game on Steam. And like, there's literally clones on PlayStation that's like mouthwash. And it has the same premise that's like on the Steam page with an AI generated image. Like that's on PlayStation Store that they need to figure this out and like clean it up. So for me, I think it's just going to be a tool, and I don't want to get too doom and gloom because I do think the true artists, like you can't replace that.
No, yeah, I think that totally makes sense. And that goes back to the two things is that it's a tool. So first of all, you have to utilize it well. And either it gets utilized well, like Inception, or it's utilized poorly, like Venom, where like you just got to use the tool. And if you make great art out of it, great. If you don't, then that should be on the people involved. And then the other thing is you need to have legislation to make sure, or policies on PlayStation's part, for example, where you don't get that shovelware. And you can't make it as easy as possible to have these AI generated games. So hopefully we see progress on both of those fronts for sure. So one question that I had. Oh, sorry. Did you want to say something, Tiffany?
No, I don't think I was trying to butt in at one point and be like, with great power comes great responsibility.
Nice.
When you were talking about the tool.
One question that I had for Alex, because I wasn't sure if you're gonna bring this up later or not. Do you have any thoughts on how AI is used with things like DLSS and PSSR, where that can kind of innovate as far as the way that games are not only made but also experienced?
Yeah, no, I mean that was going to be part of this segment of kind of like where do we see kind of the benefit, or like where do we want to see AI really focused on? And I do think stuff like obviously graphics and visual fidelity, and I guess the idea that obviously, you know, in terms of outputting visuals, and I guess this is more so specific to the game idea because that's right, these are real-time graphics, you know, this isn't CGI and pre-rendered stuff that you see in movies. But especially with games, you know, and graphics cards, obviously we are kind of getting to that point where there is a physical limitation on technology. And I think stuff like AI is the software aspect, right? The software solution to help overcome physical limitations. And I think this is a space where stuff like NVIDIA, right, is leading the charge with their RTX cards. That I think that this is a positive direction to say, well, you know, we can obviously fit so many transistors on this graphics card. And obviously like we're talking about trillions. There's trillions upon trillions of transistors on this graphics card. You know, huge number. And obviously we can get a lot of good performance. But there is a physical limitation, right? There's only so much electricity you can pump through these cards. There's only so much computational power you can get out of them that you have to figure out other ways, you know, how do we maximize the output, right? Like if we're trying to get the best looking thing possible, you know, how do we get there? And, you know, what's the companion to hardware? Software. And so I do think AI in that front, right? Obviously with NVIDIA's recent tech, DLSS4 and MFG multi-frame generation, where they're basically creating these additional frames to slot into the output to say, well, if I have, you know, 59 or like, let's say 57 out of 60 frames that the hardware actually outputted and I miss a few frames, you know, what's to say that software can't come in and fill in? Well, if this is what 57 of those frames look like, I can make 3 more frames and get a smooth 60 frame output, you know, having this data of saying this is what the other 57 look like. So I think stuff like that is definitely a positive direction to move in, right? Because it's helping smooth out the experience with, you know, from the technological perspective to say, right, we're not necessarily I guess just scraping data, right, and generating stuff. I guess it's generative AI
Mm-hmm.
in another sense that I think
Right.
is positive, right? Because this is something that the developers have programmed for, right? They're just trying to get there. Maybe the performance just isn't getting there, but this is something that can
Yeah.
help bridge that gap. So I do think that that is a good route to have AI
Exactly.
implemented in.
Honestly, to answer your question that you had for us, this is how I want to see AI used, especially in the short term, where we use it as a tool to help with how we experience things already, like how we develop games, how we experience those games. I think DLSS and AMD's FSR and PlayStation's PSSR, these are all AI super sampling technologies that allow you to have a game output at, say, 720p at baseline, and then the AI generates a 4K image based on that data from the 720p image. And the final result looks like a 4K image, or at least very close to it, much better than what you would have gotten otherwise. And that to me is next gen. As far as like what I've seen in the last 5 years in gaming, that's the most next gen thing that I've seen, because it allows developers to not have to worry about the physical constraints that you have on an Xbox or a Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation, where they can focus on making a great game, and then technology will help them bridge the gap with whatever hardware limitations that we have. And that's exciting, because I think we're going to start seeing that in the next consoles that we see from Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, all of them, because AMD's newest technology, FSR4, is looking amazing. Like, it looks like it's matching NVIDIA's DLSS now. And that should be exciting for all of us, because if you're playing on consoles, that's what they're using, is AMD's technology. And so we're going to see a big bump in the performance of games, where we don't have to worry about, oh, I have to sacrifice and get 30 FPS because I'm playing it on console. I don't think we're going to see that in the next generation of consoles. And that's pretty exciting to me. And that's a really cool use of using AI as a tool to make an experience better without really sacrificing someone's intellectual property and things like that. So those are the types of uses that I want to see more of in the future, for sure.
I do want to butt in, even though it seems like Matt and Tiffany are chomping at the bit to answer this question. But going back to Tiffany, when you mentioned the whole kind of AI generated trailers off of covers, I do think that that is another kind of interesting thing of, obviously for very, not to mislead or to even insinuate, there will be some video, right, like show or movie created from a book. But I do think there could be interesting things of like visualizing a story, right? Like if there's some way of taking this cover, like combining it with the words of that novel and kind of making this kind of audio visual book, maybe kind of transcending, say, right, we have audiobooks, someone just reading the story to you, but why not, and I think we've had this conversation in the past where it's like I'm more of a visualizer when it comes to reading. So talking about, when I read a book, I do like to kind of plan everything in my head, right, and kind of visualize, oh, if they describe the person like this, I want to see that, right, like inside my head. And I typically end up reading slower because of that. But I feel like maybe if there is some sort of kind of audio visual generation tool, that could be interesting, right? Not like obviously with the permission of the author, of course, but kind of using this to create a new medium of saying, well, I can have audiobooks, or I could just read the book, or I can read and watch the book, right? And I think there is maybe a potential there that could create like a brand new sector, right? This is something that I'm pretty sure hasn't been done. I'm not too big on audio narration if they do a lot of kind of like hand animated or just
No.
like maybe frame drawn pictures. But yeah, I feel like this could like open up a brand new sector of like absorbing things.
I mean,
Have you heard of those? Oh, go ahead, Tiffany.
Well, I was just gonna say it wasn't necessarily that it took the cover; it just took the contents of the book and like made a movie trailer. And then there have been some novels that have used AI generative art to make the cover instead of like hiring a human artist or whatever. But back to you, Matt.
What I was thinking is, have you heard of those people? And like, I do not struggle with this. there's, I forget if it's like 10% of the population that cannot put an image in their
Right.
head. Like you say, imagine a red apple. Like they cannot imagine what a red apple looks like in their minds. Like it is
I'm sorry
a
for your
certain
loss.
like learning disability that I had not heard about until like maybe a year or two ago. When you were talking about that, I was like, wow, AI could be a really cool tool for like different accessibility options, because I'm sure those people are not reading books. Like you guys probably thought I did have that learning disability because of how much I read or don't read, but maybe that could open up a whole new world for them if this is something that we're looking towards being accessible in all avenues of media. Maybe AI, like, it's a tool, and like we could use it for good, just like Uncle Ben told us a long time ago. Like we could definitely use it for good. That might help other people to be able to enjoy the same worlds that we have the privilege to enjoy.
I like how you're like, oh, I heard about this like learning disability. I don't see images.
She has
What?
it. Look at that.
So
She's disabled.
so-
I'm just kidding.
no, so when I read, okay, no, I did read. There's like variations of the level of how much imagery or whatever visualizations you have. When I read a book, I see the word in my. I don't see
The person. Or
I'm
the
not-
convo?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not.
She sees REDAPPA.
Yeah, like I'm not creating. I'm not creating the words that I've read on the page in my head. I'm seeing like castle. And then if I want to visualize a castle, I picture a castle that I've already seen before. I
Sure.
don't create the castle that's being described to me on the
yes,
page.
the Disney castle.
Like,
Yes.
yeah, I'm just like, oh, that castle. Like I don't know how to describe it in that. Like, I mean, I can visualize images if I want to, but when I'm reading a book, I'm just like reading the words and I don't have time to visualize the story. I know this sounds like very bizarre.
No, it's actually
But
kind of cool
to me-
though. Like it's interesting how like we all kind of experience books differently in that way, right?
Yeah, because I know, like, there are people. I've literally had a friend say, like, I stop and create the image. I'm reading the book and I stop and I take a moment and I pause and I build everything from the ground up. If they talk about a hallway that connected 2 rooms and I didn't have that hallway connected 2 rooms, they stop everything and they're recreating the house in their mind. And I'm like, who has time for that? I'm like, they live in a house. Okay.
They must really enjoy that book.
It's a house.
That's all I can say. Because like if there's like a really powerful moment in a book, I feel like I would do that, but I'm not constantly doing that throughout a book. I feel. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah.
Do you do that?
Like I even listening to a podcast, someone's telling a story about on a set, and I am pulling from different movies and different things that I'm thinking about, but I imagine everything. Like when I hear something, my mind just goes crazy with images and things.
That's amazing because I don't know what
like-
that's like.
But yeah, so yeah, I'm kind of shocked that you have that and that you still kind of pump out things, because I feel like for me, maybe it's my own attention issues that I have, but like I don't know if I'd have the motivation to read as many books as you do if I didn't have like that visual imagery while I'm reading it.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's really hard to describe. Like I'm digesting the words is the way that I read the
Interesting.
book. I'm not like seeing the movie. Like
It's
I don't
like
have
almost like transactional, like what you're talking about.
Yes!
It's like, okay, this is a castle.
Yeah,
There's
no,
a castle.
It's absolutely probably transactional, Matt. Like I'm like the words on the page, I'm digesting and comprehending the story of what's being told to me, but I don't have a mind movie. I literally and you know what, you guys, it could straight up be the speed of which I read. I read pretty
don't you?
fast.
Yeah, there you go.
So
Are you a 2-timer?
I was like 12
She's like Wile E. Coyote.
I was
over
like
here.
12 chapters in and I was like, oh, the character has red hair. I didn't know that. Like I'm like, it's a girl, there's a guy. Doesn't matter what they look like unless they're telling me something crazy. Like,
In her head, it's a bunch of little stick
Yes.
figures just like
Yeah.
hopping around. Oh.
No, Alex,
every-
it is a boy, B-O-Y, walking around with a girl,
Oh,
G-I-R-L.
Yeah. And the words are
Yeah,
just
that's
kind of
right.
chasing after each other, like, oh.
That's so funny, honestly.
I mean, so would it interest you? Like, if something like that were to be made, would you be interested in
I
kind
mean-
of like reading and having an image?
see, here's the thing. I don't think I would. Okay, first of all, that sounds like an animated story, which, I mean, I'm down for. I watch animated movies all the time. I used to watch anime all the time, cartoons. Like, I'm super into that. It's not quick enough. Like,
So yeah, no, my proposal, and this is very specific because now it's like what I want to make. Now I want to make this thing, so I'm just leaking it on the internet before I can, copyright it and hide it away and get product out to market first. But I'm thinking of something like, like in cutscenes where obviously they have like still images for certain cutscenes, like not everything's animated.
Yes.
But they show like the main scene, and then it
Narrates
like occasionally
over.
changes.
Yes.
Yeah, and then it'll change to like the next major event, but they're all still like still
Almost like
frames.
visual novels.
I'm kind of basically that. Like that's what I imagine, but like being able to generate that right via AI kind of, and that being so you're not animating the whole story out, but you're kind of doing the like key pivotal moments, and it could update as fast as you're
Ultimately,
reading
that's
it,
a cool
potentially,
idea.
Where it's like,
Like,
oh
I
yeah,
like
we're
it.
not. Yeah, we don't want
Yeah.
you to see everything. We just want you to see the core points
Yeah,
and give you
yeah.
something to look at.
I know this is like kind of, I mean, this is veering off topic, but for me, when I'm experiencing a book, I'm just trying to get it in my head
And
I
out
just need to
as
know
fast
as
as
soon as
possible,
possible.
yeah.
like
Consume it.
Do you
It's-
remember any of
it's-
these books?
it's like fast fashion. It's like get it in. I'll remember it for like a week. If it's a really good one, if I make the book my personality for more than a week, if it's like 2 weeks plus, and
Oh, that's how.
that's
you
how
know.
I know it's a 5 out of 5, like 6 out of 5 book. But like if I've digested it, I'm like, yeah, that was whatever. Like I'll just move on. It's just like in and out, man. And it's so funny to kind of talk about how I stick to like 3 or 4 core genres, and there was at one point I was like, this book wasn't that good. Is it because I've already read like 11 other books that are literally that book? But at the same time, when I go to, a restaurant, like if I go to Starbucks, I'm getting the same 3 drinks. Like I don't like, I mean, unless there's like, oh, this is a super seasonal item, and then maybe it's a flavor that appeals to me, I'll get it. But otherwise, I'm like, give me the same, white.
Java chip frappuccino.
No, the white mocha.
Shaken
Rest
espresso.
in peace.
Yep. We get it.
But yeah, but if you know what, if generative AI can help me like tell me a story as quickly as I want it to, then maybe I am on board with this.
Yeah, you're just gonna have to wear a helmet with like probes attached to every part of your.
Maybe I'll finally
temple.
see something.
One day.
One day I'll be a real girl.
Honestly, maybe it could be something because Apple's Pro Vision Max, right? That's now out of production, but I feel like there could be something there, because they had eye tracking.
Mhm.
That if something along those lines, like maybe just glasses in the future, right? If we can get the technology that condensed, where via your glasses it sees what you're looking at and how you're reading. And then that is linked to some sort of generative AI to be like, well, if this is how fast you're reading, where you are in the story, this is something that we can like pop up. Maybe it's distracting to
No,
you,
wait.
but I could see it being like in your glasses, like it creates like
Oh
the
my
tiny
God, Alex.
images to be like, oh, you're reading about a red car. And then here's this red car that just pops up like in the corner. Like it doesn't cover up the words because obviously you're reading, but it just gives you a little visual.
Like how he's
to be
dangling the
"Look,
visual.
Can I
red
tell you-
car."
Can I tell you something insane? I think I watched this one Instagram reel once where the words on the screen didn't move. So it was like the words flashed through on the same space.
Position.
Yes, the same position. And it basically was saying like, how quickly can you read? Can you read everything that's being shown to you right now? And it did it through different speeds. And I was like, I showed some people the video and they were like, I like couldn't even see like what that like the last two speeds, they're like, I couldn't read that. And to me, I read it just fine. I was like, this is what I need. I don't want to move my head and eyeballs. I need my eyes to stay on one spot and all the words just flash in front of my face at like a millimeter second, and I could just take over the world with all the books. Read.
We're learning a lot today.
I mean, that's what
We're learning so much about Tiffany.
that's what a
AI
movie
be
is,
damned.
right? A movie and a TV show is just right in front of my face in one box, and the screen is moving in front of me. That's how I digest the media the best. Alex looks very concerned. He's like, my sister is an alien. That is literally
I have
the
no
face.
idea how you read 120 books or how many ever
I think I'm
a
starting
year
to understand more, to
with
be
this
honest.
mentality. You're like in and out. Let's get out of here.
Listen, Matt. There's so many more stories to learn. To
Boy,
hear.
girl, smoochy, smoochy, red car, castle, go.
Review. It was okay.
Yeah, 3 out of 5. Didn't really stick with me.
Not enough red
Oh
car.
my gosh, that's so funny. That's basically the last 3 books I read, Matt, and I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So moving on, I don't want to keep you out, Matt. Like, Matt, is there anything you think that it could be positively used for? Obviously, Yasser and I talked about upscaling technology, and Tiffany, we kind of got her into being like, what if we could help you visualize these books instead of them just being blank words on a page? Matt, is there anything for you that you're like, man, this could really like benefit as a technology for whatever? Is it a game? Is it in movies? Is there anything?
I don't really know. Like, I think, our new accessibility approach is a great use of AI for people like Tiffany. I don't know. Like, I think it's one of those things where, 40, 50, 60 years ago, whatever, when people were like developing CGI, it's like, I don't know if they even knew the potential of it. And I feel like we're just getting to the point where people are open and honest about using it in movies. And so I am curious to see kind of what that does. I don't know. I think I'm interested to see what it is. I'm okay with the majority of it because a lot of it is going to be used by artists to make their job easier. And so I don't know, whatever they think is easier for them.
Honestly,
I say
that's
go
the
for it.
exciting part. I agree. Like, it's going to be great to see how great artists use this tool in the future. I don't think I know that answer either, but it's going to be exciting to see how they do end up using it.
As an aside, do you think someone like Banksy could create something, with how avant-garde his art is? Is there a way you think he could push that in an interesting fashion? No? All right. That's just me kind of just waxing philosophically. Because when you guys are talking about great artists pushing the boundaries even further, I'm like, the only artist I really think of is Banksy in that regard, right? Who tends to do things kind of out of the box style thinking. So, all right.
I didn't even know who Banksy was. Now I'm seeing all these images and I was like, oh, I've seen these before. Yeah. Sorry.
No.
I'm uncultured.
I would hope so. All right. Well, I think we're getting to the end. Is there any last minute words, parting values we have talking about it?
Plagiarizing is
obviously-
bad. That's my last thought.
My last
Okay.
thought is thank you for giving me an hour plus to nerd out with you guys. That was a lot of fun.
I learned a lot, honestly. Like, there's a lot of this that I just don't know. Like, I
Yeah.
know what's in my sphere. Outside of that, look, when you and
Banksy.
you guys were geeking out, I was learning quite a bit. So, and I learned who Banksy was. Yep, that's right.
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. As you also kept mentioning, we are at the beginning of this, right, really being utilized in the entertainment industry. And, it's really up to the people, right? Obviously, the tool is what it is, and it's the users that determine kind of the outcome of it. So hopefully it's all for good. Hopefully, no one's hurt in the
Surely
usage
not.
of these tools, right? Because obviously entertainment's made for our entertainment, right? Or for your own personal entertainment. And that's hopefully not at the expense of someone else. So with that, I think that does just about it. Thank you for joining us for, like I said, was probably our spiciest episode we've ever done.
Yep.
Flamin'
Actually,
hot.
I'll just make that
It's
comment.
Flamin'
Yeah,
Hot Cheetos
this is the
episode right
spiciest
here.
topic.
I'm gonna have some after this.
Yeah, for real.
Exactly. Hashtag not sponsored. Unless you want to sponsor us, Frito-Lay, please reach out to at RXP Podcast on Twitter, or check us out in the comments. Or if you want to email us, rxp.podcast@gmail.com. Been a long time since we shout that out. But once again, listeners, thank you for sticking around with us. If you're still here, remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed our content and want to experience more as we upload in the future. We try to do it bi-monthly. Sometimes it's once a month. Who knows when you get your next episode, but if you're subscribed, you'll be notified. Hit that notification bell. Thank you to Grandmaster Doug for our theme song, and until next time, take care.
Like Big Booty Simulator 2025. Like, come on in.
They must really enjoy that book. That's all I can say.